So with that, first thing we'll do is we'll call the meeting to order at 7:01. And Catherine gets to do all of her quick typing. We get to see the various head nodding and everything as she does it. Very good, much appreciated. We'll actually go over a series of minutes as well, and just in just a little bit. I'm going to move a few things around on the agenda. I'd like to handle the minutes first. We actually have 5 sets of minutes to catch up on. These are all in Dropbox, so they're available. Many of them are relatively brief. So they are from December 9th, December 10th, 2 from January 13th, and then from the last meeting of February 24th. So I'll bring them up on screen just so if people haven't seen them. And then we can vote on them individually. And then send with approval, we will send them on their way to the other processes. Okay, so first set of minutes is from December 9th. I believe Catherine took these as well, so much thanks to you. It's got the necessary information of who was there, where it was, when it started, when it stopped, and all and a list of all votes, and they're by roll call. So for those of you who may remember, this was a meeting that we had in person over at the Public Safety Building and also hybrid with Zoom. There was a bit of a problem, a little bit of a problem with getting things to work properly, although it tended to work better than the next day, which was a joint meeting. So discussion was on various components of this meeting. The rest of this meeting will actually pick up on a lot of these items, talking about town meeting updates, annual town reports, E-Code 360.
Dan, do you want to make a motion for each group of minutes or for everything at the end?
We can probably do this as one as one consent agenda. So This is the first, and if people have comments, if you can do it as I pull up each set of minutes. So this is for December 9th, December 10th. I actually created these minutes and posted them. I'll share these. This is a very brief set of minutes because we didn't actually take any votes. This is the entirety of the minutes. This is a joint meeting with the planning board. It was conducted by the planning board. All I did is copy the substance of the minutes from the planning board. This is what and I actually added the word recommended because they forgot that in theirs. Otherwise, it's exactly copied verbatim from their minutes. I thought that was sufficient for our needs as well. Any comments on this set? December 10th. January 13th, we had not one, but two meetings. They're coming up here. There we go. So the first one that we have here, this is another one that Catherine took the minutes for. This is the combination meeting with the Zoning Board of Appeals that we did as a joint meeting over at the Public Safety Building. This was our primary meeting where they joined in. This discussed some of the items that was provided by the DBA. And you'll note there wasn't much of substance in the minutes because it really was just around the recodification discussion, and they sent their comments. Any comments on this set of minutes? Thank you, Catherine. Next one, also very short. This was later on that day over at with town council. Again, just copied the minutes as taken by the town council. Sherry did a really good job of summarizing everything here. So this is the information that was provided, showed that we were present and that we did a presentation. No votes were taken. And last but not least is from February 24th. Thank you, Ann, for taking minutes. I know you were feeling much better on that day. And again, this was a meeting that we had, our last meeting, where we went ahead, we talked about the annual report, went over different things that we'd learned. And we had effectively made a decision to try and push things off till the November town meeting for the recodification as well. Any comments on any of the various sets of minutes? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the 5 sets of minutes as presented?
So moved.
Ann makes the motion.
Second.
Seconded by Kevin. Any comments? Seeing none, we will do this in the order in which you appear on my screen. I can stop sharing for this part of the vote. There we go. So with that, Catherine, you actually get to be first.
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and I vote in the affirmative. Thank you. I will mark all 5 minutes with the approval date, send them along. We are now current on our minutes. Excellent. Well done, everyone. And much thanks to our various scribes for taking accurate minutes so that we actually are able to record this. It does become very helpful, such as when I was preparing the annual report that we voted on last time, to have the minutes themselves. So excellent. Okay, moving right along. Public engagement. We have a couple of visitors from the public. If either of you would like to speak at this portion of the meeting, you are welcome to do so. Otherwise, we can also have you jump in on any individual topics as we go into the 3 other topics for today. And that's you, Julie and Scott. No, it's not Julie, Scott, and Scott. Okay, seeing none. So there are 3 topics for general bylaws that are still outstanding. In addition to the ones that Attorney Mullen still has to finish writing for us on some other miscellaneous topics. There are 3 that we just had some preliminary discussions, and in my opinion, it's just best for us to have a discussion about purpose so that we can then figure out, okay, what makes sense? What's the sense of the committee to address it? For town meeting itself, this is item number 4. there are two proposals that we discussed back in the December 9th meeting. The language would need to certainly be updated, and the source of the issue is, should we have bylaws that govern the town meeting? Should we have the town meeting vote on its own procedures to allow it to do two things? The first of which is to have a procedural vote to call an item effectively out of order. So declare an item irrelevant. And that would be by supermajority of the body present after the moderator introduces the topic on the warrant. So this would allow people to put on the warrant whatever they want per state law and per the charter. But if there's a topic that is deemed inappropriate by the body politic, that's the body there, that they don't actually have to have a full presentation. In fact, they can deny the presentation by requesting a vote before the presentation that something is irrelevant or unnecessary to be heard by town meeting without having to vote on the full topic itself. Because sometimes voting on a topic actually makes a statement as opposed to saying this is irrelevant to even vote on. So at last year, we had two town meetings where this became an issue on items of international affairs. Those might continue to come up, but it could also come up of national affairs. It could come up of things that are inappropriate for town meeting. We don't have a way of shutting down something from being on a town warrant. Anyone can bring anything to a town warrant that they want. They could say that people whose names are only 4 letters and 5 letters in their first name are not allowed to speak at town meeting. They could create a statement for that. Sorry, Kevin, but if that's the case, you won't be allowed to speak. Julie and Scott, that would also apply to each of you as well. And as nonsensical as it sounds, something along those lines, the town meeting should have the ability to not have a 10-minute presentation on the topic and be able to shut it down. So whether it was a discussion about international affairs going on in the Middle East, or whether it's something that could be a domestic componentry, if the body politic, the body present, deems a topic irrelevant, should have the ability to not have its time taken over by someone who managed to get 10 signatures. And that's all it takes to get on a town warrant. So just wanted to throw that out as an introduction. Before we get into exact language for procedural pieces, just wanted to figure out what people thought of the idea and rule for town meeting to govern itself in that way.
Dan, I have a question, and I should have raised this
Sure.
earlier when we talked about it. Have you run this by Bill Carroll as moderator, who he's been moderator for a long time. He goes to all the state moderator meetings. He takes his job very seriously. And I think procedurally, I wouldn't mind getting his opinion on what he thinks of these two things, because we're talking about regulating town meeting.
Absolutely. So I did talk with Bill extensively, both last spring and last fall before the town meetings. And he said that by the way that the town is currently run, he has no way of shutting down a conversation. The town meeting does not have that as a provision. And he doesn't want to just make a declaration as moderator. He does not see that as his role.
Correct. Yep.
And I agree with him on that as well. So moderators, some take more activist roles than others. And in reality, the moderator has an unfettered ability to make decisions on procedure. As a lawyer and as a caring moderator, whether people like his humor or not, it's something that he takes very seriously, and he will follow the bylaws of the town. So he was not able to shut things down, even if they're detestable, because the town body doesn't have a way of doing it. So we're trying to enable that without putting him in the position of having to declare something inappropriate. So it's specifically designed so that any member can make the motion, but within certain boundaries. So great question. And yes, I did have that conversation before raising the issue, and he made it very clear he's following the laws and the rules, and there isn't a procedure that currently allows for things to not be handled. It wasn't conceived that this would ever be a problem, but it has proven to be a problem that has taken extensive amounts of town meeting.
Dan, do you know if any other towns have put procedures in place similar to this?
I'm not aware of any towns with open town meeting that have. There are certainly cities and others where there is a more activist leader, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, but where they've stated that something is inappropriate and where they have a more limited ability to have people bring things to the floor. With open town meeting, any voter can bring any topic to the floor, and they automatically are a member of the town meeting. In a representative town meeting, anyone can bring an issue to the town, but they don't necessarily have the right to the floor of town meeting. You have to be a member to have the floor. So because it's more limited in most other towns, but this is an active issue that has really cropped up over the last year and a half, particularly with international affairs. Prior to that, it just wasn't much of an issue, and many towns are grappling with this. I've been joining lots of different groups, and they're trying to figure out ways around it. Different places with different jurisdictions have other tools where we're ruled by Robert's Rules of Order, and it's truly a democratic form of governance that we have. I don't want to break those pieces. So that's where I'm looking and saying, let the body make its own decision. Because some of the places that have done it have allowed it to be a leader-led decision where the leader can declare something inappropriate, and unless someone objects to it, there's no vote.
How does Tom Mullen, has he signed off on it being legal at least?
He did not have a legal problem
Okay.
with any with and in at our December meeting, he said that it was not a legality issue as much as he did not seem to express much comfort in having a vote on whether to have a discussion of a topic.
I had recalled, and I was just thinking about this because I was just cleaning up these notes from the meeting where we were discussing this last night. So it's fresh in my mind, but I had recalled discussion about whether the AG would have concerns about how to define is offensive, like which was one of the criteria originally in there, and that Tom had or Attorney Mullen had suggested that a way around that would be to instead propose a bylaw that a motion to move the question will always be in order. So it's not specific to whether or not it's offensive or inappropriate, etc. It's just anytime you want to call to motion the question, to move the question, that would be in order. And I wonder, Dan, if you've done any more thinking about that approach.
I have, and that's actually what's driving the conversation. Moving the question forces an up or down vote on the main question itself, which can, depending upon the wording of the question, be problematic. So to Tom's point, and I think he's spot on that there could be problems with the rationale. We don't have to necessarily provide a rationale for the declaration. It could just be that there is a reserved motion that allows for an item to be disposed of, and we can limit when it can be used. So as opposed to the content of why it's being disposed of, which is where I think Tom's objection was coming in, it would be just a procedural component that a person can make a particular motion. Instead of a moving of the question, it would be a motion to dispose of a question by, for relevance, or be we could state that there's always a motion for indefinite postponement is always in order. That using an existing motion like that could be confusing because of where it falls in the orders of priority under Robert's rules. We have the ability to modify it, so it's not a legal problem. It just becomes an understanding problem, which is why I would want to work with Tom, with this body's consent, to come up with the appropriate wording for a motion that would give that effect to make a particular topic at town meeting go away without voting on the content of the topic, the equivalent of an indefinite postponement.
Can you just sorry, Anne, were you going to say something?
No, continue, Catherine, but I'm so glad you just got my mind thinking back to when we had this discussion, and I did
Correct.
have a question
Yeah.
jumping off of what you said.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to ask, Dan, can you just explain a little bit more your concern with using the indefinite postponement tool that already exists?
Right now, indefinite postponement is what's called a subsidiary motion. So it's subsidiary to a main motion. You can't indefinitely postpone something until a question has been fully raised and until there's been debate. That's just the way that Robert's Rules of Order, and dare I say, yes, I actually do have a copy of Town Meeting Time, actually has this actually listed. It's postpone indefinitely is the 12th ranking of all the motions on the front, inside front cover. If anyone wants something really geeky, highly recommend you can get this book on Amazon. So it's called Town Meeting Time. It's actually what is used to govern things. It is incredibly geeky. But the idea behind it, and welcome, Eric. I can see that you joined us as well. If you want to record that, Catherine, that he joined us around 7:20. The idea, we could put it postpone indefinitely. That may be one of the ways that Tom would recommend it. And I'm thinking a motion, either an indefinite postponement is always in order, or it we allow for an indefinite postponement at that time, so that there is a way to kill a motion. I leave it to really Tom's expertise with Bill's expertise as to what to call the motion, but the effect would be the same. And the idea here is to really have the effect of an indefinite postponement, which in Wakefield we use quite a bit to defeat motions without voting on the merit of the question itself. And so it may be that the bylaw language just makes it so that that is in order before the content of a question. And if that's by bylaw, that would be higher priority than the town meeting time, distinct rules. So that's something that the body has the ability to do. And you're exactly right in terms of the effect. I would want the language to come realistically from Tom and Bill, because they're the experts on that procedure. They've been doing this a lot longer than I have. Eric's probably been to more town meetings than the rest of us combined, though.
Dan, I have a question now.
Sure.
So does this suppress free speech? Because they get their 10 signatures. What you think is relevant may not be what they think is relevant. So
it's a fantastic question.
You might think it's hate speech, but they don't think it's hate speech because in their minds it's not hate speech. It's hate speech. I mean, free speech is free speech. There is no hate speech unless you're the person listening to it. But in them, it's not hate speech. So it's kind of a touchy subject,
It's a great point, Joe, and I appreciate you raising it. Hate speech absolutely can still be hate speech. Even I'm just going to disagree with you a bit on that. Well, it may be permissible speech, but it can still be hate speech. The intent and the
so in the eyes of the whoever's, yes, but in someone else's eyes it may not be. But
in the eyes of the law, though, it can be hate speech. Yeah, the law can determine something to be hate speech, even if someone doesn't think it. Joe, what you said, I totally agree with, but I would switch the terms. Relevance is a legal term. I think if we get rid of offensive, that's where people can dance on a pin. But relevance can be determined by Bill if something is not relevant, legally relevant to the town meeting, to our town. I think objectively it could be, that's where the conversation can be struck. Offensive makes me nervous because you're right.
Agreed.
The person next to me finds something offensive that I don't, vice versa. But relevance is a different creature. So that's where I would want Tom to see if that's the word, if we want to go forward with this, that's the word that you would focus on.
sometimes these questions get arose, and it's something that has to do with a country that's like that's the last couple questions that came up. A country that's on the
Mhm.
other side of the world, but they somehow draw it to Wakefield. So to them, that's relevant because we look at it, it's like, oh, it's in Somalia, or it's in the Ukraine or something. That's not relevant to us, and somehow they bring it to the police department in Wakefield that's building something. That's something I don't know how they do it, but they bring it in there, so that's their relevance. That's what
And
I
and
felt like the last one that came up at town meeting. They were talking about the police department in Wakefield, right? Something like that.
they were. You're correct. They did tie it into funding and training and other pieces as a way of creating a nexus. And for relevance, I agree with both of you. I don't want to suppress speech, and I think that relevance is best determined by the body that's present by a supermajority, not a majority, so that way you don't get a topic that, well, a few people don't like it, even many people don't like, but there's enough people. And so that's why I would I would actually push for it to be a 75% threshold to basically curb the discussion. So if someone wants to bring up, and it would be a debatable topic. So you'd get a short debate, probably 2 minutes, to say why a topic is in fact worthy of further discussion. But otherwise, to have 10 minutes on something that may be deemed hate speech or just distasteful or inappropriate to the town meeting itself, it allows the town meeting to say, look, we're in control of our time. And to allow a 2-minute debate period, which is consistent with other parts of how our town meeting operates, for that discussion, 2 minutes per person, allows the town meeting to say either it's relevant or it's not. And if a town meeting says, the article that we have that doesn't allow anyone named Joe Pride to talk at town meeting because they got 10 signatures that they didn't want Joe Pride to talk at the meeting.
Yes, but I would
They
want them to discuss. I would want them to tell me why. So I have to give them some amount of time to tell me why that I'm not allowed at the meeting. To give them their side, I guess. You can't just shut them down because you don't think I should be at that meeting. 100% of the 90% of the people don't think I should be. I need to know why he wants to know why I'm not supposed to be at that meeting. I guess I don't.
They don't
I don't
actually
know.
even have to answer that. If it's a town meeting article, they don't have to answer any questions. All they have to do is they bring up the article. They can talk about whatever they want for 10 minutes. They could talk about buildings, they could talk about bylaws,
Yeah,
they could
true.
talk about anything else for 10 minutes, and we have to endure it as town meeting attendees. And we've been through that a few times, and that's where I look and say, town meeting deserves the ability to protect itself. And that's really what I'm talking about, without infringing anyone's ability to bring a topic to town meeting. They get the topic, it gets introduced by the moderator, whether it's tasteful, not tasteful, anything like that. And then if someone brings up this reserved motion of irrelevance or something like that, and it gets the necessary second in may require multiple seconds or something along those lines, then there can be a very short discussion, 2 minutes per person, and the body can say, okay, we're going to vote on it as to whether this is relevant or not. If 26% of the people there, still a minority, say we want to discuss it, you go on with the discussion. That way it could be for something that could seem to be nonsensical, but still self-managed. An example of something would be, we want to rename Lake Quannapowitt. Pick your name of choice. Doesn't really matter. It could be, we're going to rename Lake Quannapowitt because we don't want it to be that. We're going to rename it to Lake Steve in honor of Steve Mayo's retirement. Something that on its face, we might say, is that worthy of town meeting actually have a discussion? Irrelevant to the fact that town meeting doesn't regulate the name itself. And then we might, at town meeting, someone might say, that's not a relevant topic for town meeting. And if 26% of the people, or whatever the number is in threshold, say we want to debate it, it gets debated. If they don't, then we don't have to waste at least 10 minutes plus debating a topic that just by its own definition isn't relevant. That's the reason behind having a relevance motion. of some sort. It's really to protect town meeting from nonsensical types of topics or truly offensive topics. And where we've had it brought up now at several meetings, it seems prudent for the town meeting to protect itself. And that's really what we're trying to debate. And I respect the opinion that something might be distasteful, but it might have enough relevance that people say that, okay, I'm willing to debate it, because they might want to actually vote the topic down. So just because I don't agree with something doesn't mean that I would vote that it's irrelevant. Relevance is different than the topic, but I think the town meeting should make that decision amongst its members. And that's really the reason why I'm bringing up the topic in this way. Because this is something that in historically more civilized bodies, and I say it that way just because we've seen a de-evolution in many sorts of legislative bodies where there was a level of decorum, respect, and expectation that currently has been greatly diminished. And I'm trying to allow for the body to protect itself. Just as in Congress, there's the ability to throw members out. We don't have that ability. Unless someone is disruptive, the moderator has the ability upon clear notice, but the body can't say, well, this person isn't a member anymore. We don't have that ability. So that's where I'm just trying to say, okay, we have a way of managing. But I agree with all of the comments that we need to work with the town council and moderator to come up with the right language. And I suspect that it will really be around relevance, not any of the other types of components. So thoughts, and anyone's welcome to contribute, because whether you're a town meeting member, regular attendee or not, this is a really important topic because it does become a bridge for other components as well.
Brought it up with any members of town council?
What was the question?
Have you brought the concept up with any members of town council out of curiosity?
I have discussed it briefly. The members of the town council have not really wanted to bridge it until they see what it would look like. It's something that as long as their motions are protected, they didn't seem to express much interest in having a problem with it. And the components of the proposal, as I'm thinking about it, is that anything that's brought to town meeting by a body that has that has elected membership or is appointed by elected membership is not eligible for this motion. That way you can't say, oh, the budget is irrelevant. Sorry, that's out of order by its face. If there is a zoning article brought by the planning board, it's automatically in order. If there is, however, a zoning article brought by a private citizen that is patently just weird, even if it's not supported by the planning board, but there was a public hearing, such as rezoning the whole lake to be multifamily housing, and it has to, every part of the lake has to have 15 units, and I'm being nonsensical intentionally. That type of article, the town meeting might say, we're not even going to take our time with this. We're going to deem it irrelevant. But if it was brought by the planning board, it would automatically be relevant. That way, it can't be weaponized easily. It's really designed for individual issues. If someone gets a town board, a multiple member board, to sign on to something, then it's automatically deemed relevant for the purposes of the town meeting. And I think that's why our town charter allows any multiple member board to automatically bring something forward. So really good questions. Other thoughts? And Scott, you're welcome to jump in on this. I know that you're interested in governance. So yes, you're welcome to jump in, and the way we run these meetings, love to have feedback.
Scott Moncali, Walden Road, 32. I wasn't sure whether I could ask questions, so I was just muttering to myself, I wonder if they'd let me ask a question. So with that one, anybody with 10 signatures of Wakefield can present an article, much like Ed Dombrowski did with his minimal compliance MBTA 3A map, which that would be looked at as a non-relevant article, according to what you've just been talking about, even though it was more relevant than the oversized one that was presented by the planning.
It's
So
not that it
I
would be
think-
relevant or not, just to be clear. It means that whether a potential motion for relevance would be in order or not. That's
Right.
all it would mean, is that whether someone could make a motion or not. And in that case, which I think is a great example, I would imagine that the vast majority, in fact, of people would say, yes, this is something worth debating. In which case we then debate it. If someone were to say, oh, this is irrelevant.
Because anything presented brought by a board seems to be deemed to have more importance than something brought by a citizen of the town, which I don't think should be.
I'm
the
having a
case.
little bit
When-
of trouble hearing you,
Scott, we
Scott.
can't hear you very well.
Sorry, so I would be concerned that anything presented by a board would be considered to have more relevance than something brought by a voter if they have the requisite paperwork. Regardless of what you think about the topic, and I agree that some of them seem to be irrelevant to the town, but people do bring stuff forward, and even though we might disagree with it and disagree vehemently with some of the language that they still have the right, the Supreme Court of Massachusetts calendar that you can get up, and part of that case was because somebody was calling somebody from one of the boards a Nazi, but they ruled that as repulsive as you think, they have the right to say whatever it is they want. And they could get up and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. It doesn't have to be within the four squares.
We're still losing you a little bit, Scott, I think in your mic, but I think that's a great point you brought up, but it's not that a citizen's petition would always be irrelevant. That you couldn't challenge something from a town board or appointed board, which I kind of, as someone who's been on several of these boards, I think it could get quite disruptive with the order of the town if you could throw out things brought by the boards. However, if a citizen brings something, the super majority is quite I still think there's a lot of ability for that to be heard. So one's not deemed more relevant than the other. Dan, is that correct?
That is correct.
Be careful that we're not hindering people's free speech on things as some of this is done. And I know, Dan, you've probably been talking with Tommy quite a bit about this because of that Supreme Court case. That people can say what they want and people can put in articles about whatever they want. We haven't had a lot of it, but we've had a number of the same. And I think that's been alluded to in this meeting, and you need to be careful with that as well, because what you may think is not relevant, some of them may, and where this is a meeting that they can go back to and reference, I'd just be wary of everything that's said as you're going through all this. That, sometimes that stuff has to come. And I think the best point of action is to have the board itself just vote, move the question, and let's just get this over with and vote it down or vote it up, whatever the body decides. So.
And the idea behind this, to be very clear, is for the citizen petitions, and it would be isolated to them in reality. It would give the rest of town meeting the ability to have it challenged once. So if there is something that the necessary people at town meeting, it would not just be a simple person and second, it would have a higher threshold. Say that they want a declaration of relevance, or they make a declaration of irrelevance, however it gets worded, that then goes to the town meeting itself. at that same, right then and there, is this a relevant topic? And for it to be deemed not requires a large supermajority. And I think that's the point that Ann was trying to make. A large supermajority, 3/4 of the attendees to say, we don't want to even discuss this, whatever the topic is. It only requires 26% to say, we even want to have a discussion. I may disagree about the topic, but I will allow it to be heard. An example of this that we do see at a smaller scale is to move the question before there's ample discussion on something that is of significant discussion. We see this pretty regularly on major items of debate, especially if there's a lot of spending involved, or even, the MBTA zoning articles. People are discussing it, someone gets tired, they move a question, and it only requires a majority to then shut down everyone else who was waiting in line to discuss. And this says, are we going to effectively do that? But it's going to require 3/4 of the people there to say, we don't want to hear anything. If 3/4 of the people there don't want to hear it, they shouldn't be subjected to having at least 10 minutes plus of their time listening to something where they don't even want to hear it. If it's brought up by a board or something, and anyone can bring a topic to a board, and the board puts it on the warrant, it's going to be heard. So anyone always has multiple avenues to get something to town meeting. It will not prevent anything from going to town meeting at all. It's just, should town meeting have the ability to preserve itself from time? Because otherwise we could get serial articles. We could get 5, 6, 7 articles on effectively the same topic, and they will each have to be heard. And there isn't a way to stop that. We see this type of gamesmanship at other levels of legislative bodies. It's fairly common when you get to, especially Congress and so forth, to have gamesmanship for the sake of gamesmanship to get a particular item passed. And this is a way to really isolate and prevent that, so that we don't get 7 articles that are effectively on the same topic. We might vote on one if a town board brings it up, then we're going to have those discussions. And that's the idea, because I agree with you. We don't want to suppress something. And if someone doesn't like the results of town meeting, they can always bring it up again. And if they get enough people, they can force a special town meeting. So it's a beauty of our democracy that we have the ability to force the ability to have topics come up. We don't necessarily have the right to force a full audience to be captive. And that's what this really comes down to. We can force that there's going to be a topic about Israel, about Gaza, about renaming a body of water, whatever it happens to be. It doesn't mean that we necessarily feel that we have the ability to take action, or that the body has the ability to have its time taken. Because anyone who is at town meeting is a volunteer who's a town meeting member, unless they're a town employee. And that I respect everyone's time who goes there, because it's really valuable. And to have discussions on things that the body feels are irrelevant seems really disrespectful to the town meeting attendees. That's a big part of what is driving this. And we've now seen it happen at multiple town meetings. So, thoughts?
The other question that just came up for me as we were talking about this is whether this process is to me, the value of a process like this, I can see upsides and downsides. An upside would be like the potential of saving time at town meeting, to be honest, because town meetings get really long, and I think that contributes to low attendance, etc. But I also wonder whether the possibility of introducing this process could actually end up inadvertently elongating the meeting, because if you have, like, it's a 10-minute discussion time that we're trying to avoid, but all it takes is 5 people to comment on whether or not we should be indefinitely postponing to make up that 10 minutes. And I could very easily see more than 5 people trying to comment on this procedure. So that's another thing to weigh. And I actually wonder whether it would just make sense to try to draft. I know you said, Dan, you've got to work with Attorney Mullen to try to draft some language and then circulate it around with town council and with the town moderator, et cetera, to just try to get some more insight from folks who are running the meeting and are intimately involved with the meeting, so that we just have a little bit more thoughts on sort of the pros and cons to be able to weigh this as a committee.
And that's the purpose of this discussion, is to gauge, do we want to go through that process or not? That's the purpose of it being brought up tonight. Because there isn't language in front of us that is acceptable. So that's where it's a matter of, do we go forward with that? I can certainly take that on as chair, but I'm only going to do it with the agreement of the body itself.
I guess I don't see harm in drafting the language and trying to get input about the language. I don't know that I have a strong position yet on whether I have a foot on both sides of this. But I don't see any harm in drafting the language and getting more input so that we have more information to make this decision.
To kind of stem off of what Catherine was saying, and one question I have, I guess, before I say this is, Dan, are you thinking this is included as part of the overall bylaw review package with the zoning codification?
No, it would be a separate article.
Okay.
It's definitely a separate topic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to recommend, because I think this could have stronger opinions among people than, the renumbering and the grammar and the punctuation that we're changing among the package of bylaw updates that we'll be bringing forth. So I agree with Catherine. I don't think there's any harm in having something drafted. I might recommend public forums just on that particular item before it's brought to town meeting. I think there will be some strong opinions. And I do think one thing that we should think about, that Scott sort of brought up and hinted at, is, does this prioritize elected bodies or appointed bodies over the average citizen? Which I understand people could look at that different ways. I think a lot of people who look at town meeting as a very special, unique form of government that we have would say everyone there is an equal member. So we are sort of prioritizing certain people and the bodies that they're on over the average Joe or Jane who shows up. But there is that matter of being courteous to people's time.
I'm with Catherine. I don't think there's harm, Dan, in just seeing how it's drafted. But if this is going to be a cluster hoo-ha, I say we don't, it just is going to, it's not going to be worth it. If people are going to spin about this, thinking that we're taking away their rights, which we're not, or we're prioritizing government bodies over regular citizens, which we're not, I would argue, I don't think it's worth it. But there's no harm in drafting it.
Yeah, I think you're right. The sentiment isn't prioritizing or taking away people's free speech, but I think the optics could make it seem that way.
100%. People may not understand what we're trying to do, and they'll go off on it in a way where we didn't intend it to be interpreted that way. But if that's how it's being interpreted, I don't think it's going to be worth our time, frankly, to defend it. But Dan, there's no harm in drafting something, and let's see how it plays out.
Other thoughts? Joe, Eric?
No, I agree with everything that was said. It could spiral out of proportion.
Eric, if you're able to unmute, if you have anything you'd like to contribute. Scott and Julie, if you'd like to add anything. again, welcome to give your opinions.
No, I just thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I appreciate it. I would caution, to Ann's point, the optics of it could really destroy what the intention of this is. And I totally understand the intention if I'm surmising what everybody was talking about, because I don't want to get involved in that conversation, but you might not, on the face of what the article is, you should be able to understand. And then, people have the opportunity to get up to speak to their article. Maybe it's, limiting that time that everybody gets to speak, because we can always vote to extend people's time to speak. So if it's limited to 2 minutes of stuff that you don't want to listen to everybody, to all the boards and to everybody, if we want to extend that time to 10 or 20 minutes or whatever, as we often will do to allow people more time to speak, then maybe we just change that time up front. So there's only, instead of, it's referred to as wasting people's time in 10 minutes, we're only saying 2 minutes. I would just caution that, you can't limit what it is they're going to say, as they can say whatever they want. It's not like we used to be able to say, keep it within the 4 squares. All that's out the window now. That's all been ruled on. Said we came out of a revolution and things weren't polite and things weren't, they were very contentious. So it was, I would just caution that. I understand the thought process behind it, and I can appreciate that. I just look at the optics of it, can, unless it's really clearly written out, that it could be kind of bad. But
Okay, so what I'm taking from this, and I appreciate the input from everyone, is we'll contact Attorney Mullen, come up with some draft language, and then at another meeting when we're not discussing the zoning bylaws, we will come back to this with more firm language, and we'll see at that point, does it make sense to move forward or not? The message is that the language needs to be extremely tight, needs to be clear, and the purpose of it needs to also be stated. So there is not easy room for misinterpretation. And I think those are the messages that are coming through very loud and clear. And through this collaborative process, I think we have the ability to come up with something that is actually really good. And so I really appreciate everyone's input on this. So that's the primary item on town meeting. The other item that we had discussed previously was about town meeting dates and objections on that. Unless anyone wants to bring that one forward, I think just by bringing it up, it has helped to elucidate the need for the town council, which sets the dates, to be much more cognizant of what's happening. I think that's an issue that we can effectively push down the road to see if it becomes a problem again. That's my feeling on that, unless others have different approaches to that. It has been a problem. Hopefully it will not be going forward. Okay, next one is general bylaws about annual reports. This was again a follow-up to some items that had come up at the prior town meeting. Eric, I wasn't sure if you wanted to work with Attorney Mullen or otherwise to try and come up with some draft language to propose for some of the changes that you were proposing for the annual report itself. If you have the ability to give input into the meeting. You can also potentially do reactions at the bottom of thumbs up and thumbs down as a way of giving input. It looks like Eric may still be having difficulties, unfortunately. If Eric writes up something that is able to be shared with the committee, I will do so. Okay, that brings us to item 6. which is general bylaws about rodenticide. This is a topic we've discussed previously, and about sometimes referred to as SCARs, second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, and there are also third generation and so forth. This is a topic about should we potentially look at having a bylaw for town property only. There is not the ability to regulate at any level rodenticides outside of the town property itself. Rodenticides, which, to be very clear, do cause problems in other mammals as well as birds and so forth. There is no such thing as a safe poison for a bird. There have recently been several raptor deaths in town that have been definitively tied to rodenticides. And these are the poisons. There is no such thing as a safe poison. It just doesn't exist. If anyone needs details on that, the Audubon Society is very clear about that. The State Department of Agriculture, Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, is the only body that can actually regulate the rodenticides across the town. But several communities, including Arlington and very recently Lowell, have created their own effective bans on rodenticides on town property. So that's where the town owns. That would be schools, that would be parks, things along those lines. What people do on private property is again regulated by the state and otherwise. Whether it's necessary, whether some sort of rodent control is necessary to the extent determined by the health department, that's a separate issue. This is just about the town property, because that would be the extent of anything we could do. And there become a variety of elements, but this has recently gained some traction in other communities. And I wanted to bring up the issue, as it had been brought up by several people in the community. Do we want to look at requesting either a bylaw or requesting a policy set by either potentially the health department or the town council, because any of those bodies have the ability to create a policy level that would prevent the use of rodenticides on town-owned property. We're not talking about privately owned property. What people do on their own property related to this, again, governed elsewhere. But there have been quite a few problems. The rodenticide that is used is extraordinarily dangerous to humans. It's to the point where the actual safety sheet, the material safety sheet, the MSDS, for those of you who are familiar with those, actually says that police and fire, in the event that there's water, such as sprinklers in the schools, need to go in with disposable rubber boots, and the rubber boots must be disposed of safely as hazardous waste. Yes, this is the same chemical that is around all of our schools. It is I've obtained the information. It's called Contract, and Lumitrack with Contract, and that's what's used in the town. It is a pretty significant poison. It causes internal bleeding by anything that eats the poison or that eats something that has been poisoned. So that's where we've seen quite a few raptors. So I just wanted to get opinions. Is this something that we want to pursue or refer off with a recommendation to another board?
Dan, do you have information about, like, how much does the town currently use rodenticides? The town, like,
the town
Wakefield.
actually uses it quite a bit. Last time I looked at the Galvin Middle School, there were 13 traps outside. Of the 13 traps, 13 were placed improperly according to the instructions for the traps themselves, which is a pretty scary thought. So that was when I went and inspected, but I've seen them around the DPW buildings. I've seen them around each of the schools that I visited. So it is used to try and reduce the rodent population on town property. I can't say whether it's used at any of the parks or other elements, but raptors don't care where they catch their prey.
Dan, I almost think that I would reach out to Board of Health and DPW. I mean, DPW is the one using them.
Actually, the schools use it separately from DPW.
So, but maybe Board of Health is a place to start because this sounds more like their lane or something that certainly that they've done in the past. I was on Board of Health 100 years ago, and we did do some of these things. Talk about trapping and related items. So maybe starting with them to have them investigate, since they're kind of the experts on this, or certainly the health agent would be, not the board members.
I'm raising it to gain input. I'm certainly open to sending this in whatever direction this body deems appropriate. So thank you for that input.
I would agree with Ann. This feels more policy driven than what our committee typically would focus on. So I feel like it should go more to the subject matter experts to look at. Though I think it's good to bring up with them.
Okay. And would you view that as being a town council oriented policy or Board of Health? And I'm asking that to those of you who serve on multiple boards in particular, because I can see it going in both directions.
I think Board of Health to Town Council. I think it starts with Board of Health. And if they wish to bring it before the Town Council to ask for input or ask them to proceed with it, I can imagine that's how it might flow.
That feels like the right place to start.
Hi,
That's helpful.
Dan, it's Julie, can I say something?
Sure.
And I agree with you. Under the town charter, the schools are under the auspice of the town council. They oversee all the school buildings and all the buildings on the property. So you're right, it should start with the Board of Health, and it'd be a policy by the town council. And in the town charter, the DPW oversees all the school buildings. So it should be all three. But because of a lot of town property abuts the lake, I would also hope that we would include the Conservation Commission. So those are my thoughts.
And the Conservation Commission, for what it's worth, has been, I've talked with people on the Conservation Commission. They are aware of the issue, and are definitely supportive of figuring out appropriate controls.
But you talk to people who have had experience in other communities through their work and other relationships with their jobs, and they can bring a lot to the table. So I agree with Ann.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, Catherine, Eric, we can now see you.
I like the idea of bringing it to the Board of Health.
Can I just I just had another thought. You had mentioned, Dan, in your synopsis and background, I never considered the fire department. I would also bring them in as well, because education is power, and it's important for the right hand to know what the left hand is doing. Thank you.
That's assuming that we have a right hand and a left hand. If it's like how I dance, I've got two left feet. But the point is definitely heard.
Yeah, I guess maybe do some. I guess the towns should do some research, because if I can use it and my neighbor can use it and all the restaurants downtown can use it, what's the point of getting rid of it if just a couple schools are just going to get rid of it, and a couple pieces of property on the town that the town owns, if everyone else is going to use it? I mean, I guess you get rid of a few baits, but they're still going to be out there. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's a start if the town does it, but I don't know how much it's going to help if everyone else is using it. And I know there's a big rat population on the west part of Wakefield, because that's where my sister lives and she sees them all the time. So I'm sure she's not going to be happy if more rats start moving into the town of Wakefield. And as you know, they don't pay rent. So
They most certainly don't. And rodent control is a very real issue. From everything that I know about rodents, which is more than I care to in reality, it comes down to rodents will go where there's food sources. and where there's hospitable living. And it does not mean that the west side is more hospitable than Greenwood, just to be very clear on that. They will like any part of town that they can find warmth, find shelter, find food, find water. That's really all they care about. And they are found throughout the town, unquestionably. But those are they're very basic for what their core needs are, and it really is just those 4 items. And they will absolutely be there. To your point, I think that anywhere we can start is helpful. If it's the town uses another means of pest control, because let's make no mistake, they are pests. But if the town uses alternative means and it saves raptors, even if it only saves 1 or 2 raptors, those are birds that continue to be a part of our ecosystem. And they're important. We finally
Yeah.
have bald eagles back again. We have red-tailed hawks. We have Cooper's hawks. We have some peregrine falcons. And we've recently lost almost all of those in Wakefield and the surrounding communities due to rodenticide. We may not be able to regulate it at a larger scale. That's being worked on by others. But if we gain the community's interest in saying, hey, this isn't the right thing to do, it also tells people, hey, there are other options, without having to force people into a decision.
Joe, this reminds me several years ago of when the DPW, the town switched from the type of fertilizer they used, because it was going into the lake, and it was not doing great things. So they backed off of that. They use a much more natural fertilizer. As a citizen, it woke in me, like it made me think about what I wanted to use. So to Julie's point, if this is something folks are interested in, I think education would be critical. I have, believe me, as a West Side person, they are big. And my neighbor has a bird feeder, and when that bird feeder gets knocked over, it's a whole family living there. So I'm not a rat fan, but if there's a way to do it so we can save the raptors, I think that's, this is a small step in taking a look at it, and the Board of Health can take a look at it.
Julie, again, can I just say, I've got the volume on very low, so I keep thinking you're saying we're losing a lot of rappers, like singers. I'm very shocked.
Rappers are still doing really well. Yes.
I do know that the Conservation Commission, the Board of Health, and the Environmental Sustainability Committee are always interested in sponsoring opportunities for education. So that's something, again, if you could bring those entities in. And also, perhaps with the education, and if the town is going to be switching to a different product, perhaps the town could make an agreement with the manufacturer of the product or approved products and offer at a discount business entities in the community, especially our restaurants. And maybe they can get some publicity for choosing to go that way in the future. So just a thought, education, outreach to the other boards, and have them take it from there, and it involves students as well. Thank you. And let's pray for the lives of the rappers. Thank you.
We'll pray for the lives of both the rappers and the raptors. So thank you for that. Great ideas, Julie. I've taken notes of that as well. Eric, we can see you. I think we can probably hear you. If you'd like to contribute.
Well, I'm suggesting that in addition to the town property, you might go 50 or 100 feet away from that to increase the no rat poison. So, but that's an idea.
I can tell you offhand, anything along those lines that goes out for the purposes of most control, the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources will put an absolute halt to almost anything that goes outside of the town managing its own property, because they regulate the pesticides and they're the only ones who regulate them. There is a move on Beacon Hill to change that. So this is not happening in a vacuum. And if the regulations are permitted to be done at a local level, I think your idea has a lot of merit. But that topic was actually brought up in a meeting that I had with Attorney Mullen and the MDAR attorneys. So that you're onto something. It's just currently not permissible by state law.
Thank you for your very full answer, and it's nice to know that I'm a voice for the future. Thank you.
Your voice from the future and from the past. You get both.
Yes.
And while we can see you, Eric, did you have anything you wanted to talk about for the other topics, the annual reports or other items? I just want to make sure you're not lost in here.
I had submitted something last fall, which got caught between two big articles, and the thought was that it became complicated to explain, so there was indefinite postponement. I had done it at that time to avoid being in our big package that this committee would produce. So I'm not have anything special with regards to town reports, but I do suggest, and perhaps it was discussed at the other meeting where I had all kinds of problems on my side, that you could correct some of the simple errors that have occurred in the present report and mentioned in my 4-page thing, and also require for a town body that's consisted of 4 nouns, all not capitalized, to be capitalized, and do that as a first step in the coming town meeting before the fall town meeting. But that's a suggestion. But the point is, we know we have the 7th of March to submit articles, but this is a board that's still working, and it tells them how much work is involved in the articles and what the final form would be after you talk to town council singular. Thank you.
Okay, and we're not submitting any articles for this town meeting, just to
Okay.
be to clarify that. So
And neither will I.
So this will be an interesting town meeting as it is.
Mhm.
So otherwise, great help for rodenticide. What I'm taking from this meeting is to refer the issue to the Board of Health with recommendations to have inclusion of the Environmental Sustainability Committee, the Conservation Commission, and also to possibly see with the DPW if there is any sort of resolution that if there's the ability to do bulk purchasing and extend discounts to others in the town, that could also be very helpful. That's what I'm taking from the discussion on rodenticides, that it's something that is a worthwhile discussion to have, but we're not the ones to lead. Is that an accurate representation based on the head nods?
And if you get businesses supportive of it, the group can be called the Rat Pack. I'll stop. Bye.
I'm all I can say to that is, oh, rats. Okay. True story. There's not something that always comes up at a municipal meeting, but seems awfully relevant given that last comment. Growing up, my brother thought that saying rats was actually a swear word when he was very young. So instead of doing that, he would always say, "Oh, mice." So from one rodent to another, you never know what you're going to deal with. But we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is actually really helpful in discussion for town meeting annual reports and rodenticide.
Actually,
With that,
think of one more thing.
Sure.
And I'm serious about this. Large building sites, often like in Melrose, where they were building near the Fellsway a few years ago, a tremendous rat issue uprose with the movement of all the earth. This might be something that the Conservation Commission, maybe the planning board could put in. I don't know if the conservation or planning, I know the conservation has orders of conditions, but I'm wondering if the planning board could consider something like that in the future. Thank you.
So that, I'm not sure if it's planning board or ZBA.
That would be ZBA. We would put that in a condition.
Is that something, just out of curiosity, that has been mitigated
We-
or handled?
It's not something that has been brought up, but it's a good idea that we could add that into an order of conditions,
So
especially on.
having had a family member living on Auburn Street in, at the time that the Foundry Street building started, it was unbelievable how much that changed the fabric of the neighborhood with all the rodents that appeared. And it wasn't just rats. So it might be something that should be thought about. Thanks.
Thank you. Very helpful, and something that can also get referred off. And as part of that order of conditions, it could also be stated what types of elements can be used as well. While you may not be able to regulate the chemicals, you probably, as a part of orders of conditions, can state the types of controls and so forth. I would imagine that would be permissible to some extent, to be consistent. So just throwing that out there. So if there's a town-wide componentry, that can be leveraged by many different boards. But just having this meeting is definitely increasing awareness, which is helpful. So with that, next meeting by our calendar, because we're not going to meet on Anne's favorite day of the year, which is St. Patrick's Day, or because her family will have to celebrate it. The rest of us can celebrate it with whatever form of green beverages that we so choose, or otherwise.
Just
So
to be
I'll get
clear, not my favorite day of the year, but I would like to not have a bylaw meeting on that date. Two very different things.
Okay, we will not be having a bylaw meeting. And if anyone would like to get together for a green beverage, we can certainly do so, but it will not be at a bylaw meeting. So with that, our next meeting is scheduled for April 7th. And that would presumably be to cover, again, general bylaws. Per our last meeting, we probably won't get into details of zoning until after the May town meeting. That way, if there's any additional changes or outcomes from that town meeting, those can get incorporated by Attorney Bobrowski. So I think what may make sense is to tentatively schedule something for April 7th. And if there isn't any substantial movement on these issues, then the meeting itself won't be called. So that just, I don't want to have us have a meeting for 5 minutes to say there's no real updates. So if there's something of substance, does that seem to be reasonable for people? Availability, okay?
Yes.
Okay, so April 7th, 7 p.m. Along those lines, do people have a preference between 7 o'clock and 7:30, since we've done some meetings at both times?
Early is better, but
7's fine.
Okay, 7 o'clock it is. With that, there's a whole variety of upcoming holidays and observances over the course of the next month. I try to include these in the actual meeting notice for awareness. So we got everything from Mardi Gras, Ash Wednesday, Daylight Savings Time, Purim, Holy, St. Patrick's Day, which has already been mentioned. Equinox in spring is going to begin on March 20th. So this is very important. It is after Daylight Savings Time, so don't forget the Sunday to move your clocks forward, and you lose an hour. It's the shortest day of the year. Then there's Lelat al-Qadr, there's Eid al-Fitr, and the last date that I listed on here on April 0 or April 1st is April Fool's Day. So I'm not sure if anyone who looked at the notice caught that, but I tried to put in a little bit of April Fool's humor into the actual notice itself. That's about as much as we can get away with in a municipal meeting notice. But it's officially listed on April 0 for that one. Anything else? Anything unexpected? Okay, before we take a motion to adjourn, want to again say thanks to everyone for being able to show up. Thanks, Catherine, for taking minutes. Once you have them, please put them in Dropbox, and you can, if you want to send them by email as well, you can. we'll send those notes out. I will update all these other minutes and send those on as well. So with that, thank you, everyone. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ann makes the motion. Eric, do
Second.
you second?
I will second it, yes.
Eric is going to second the motion. That way he gets it on the minutes for that. So we got a
Yes.
motion made and seconded for adjourning the meeting, in which case we will take this vote in the order in which you appear on my screen. Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
and I vote in the affirmative. So the meeting is adjourned at 8:22. Thank you, everyone. For those of you who joined us as guests, thank you very much. Much appreciate having the input and getting your perspectives as well. So thank you, everyone. See you next month or at the latest in May. Thank you much. Take care. Have a good night.
See you.